Secession! 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 Okay, that's as far as I'm going with that. I'm not Randy Rainbow. I'm just not. Here in the United States, 160 years ago, the South started a civil war when it tried to secede to keep its slaves. Today, a bunch of Republicans want to secede again because they don't like being called racist for thinking the ones who seceded to keep their slaves were the good guys. Recently, on President's Day, in fact, Member of Congress from Georgia's 14th District, Marjorie Taylor Greene, tweeted, "We need a national divorce. We need to separate by red states and blue states and shrink the federal government. Everyone I talk to says this. From the sick and disgusting woke culture issue shoved down our throats to the Democrats' traitorous America Last policies, we are done." Leaving aside the heavy, everyone I talk to says The Last Jedi is the worst Star Wars movie energy there, Greene's idea is nothing new. It's not even new for her. Over a year ago, she mentioned national divorce in support of a tweet suggesting that people who move to a red state from a blue state shouldn't be allowed to vote for a certain period of time. She really seems to think it's a good idea. After her more recent tweets on the subject, Greene went on Charlie Kirk's show and explained further, quote, "What I think would be something that some red states could propose is, well, okay, if Democrat voters choose to flee these blue states where they cannot tolerate the living conditions, they don't want their children taught these horrible things, and they really change their mind on the types of policies that they support, well, once they move to a red state, guess what? Maybe you don't get to vote for 5 years." So let's break this down for a second. Greene's idea is that red states should pass laws preventing people who move there from blue states from voting for 5 years. There are a few problems with this that jump out right away. First and foremost, how crude her concept of what constitutes a red state and a blue state seems to be. There are varying definitions of what makes a given state red or blue. Sometimes it's as basic as which party's candidate got that state's electoral votes in the most recent presidential election. Greene seems to be going with the idea that a red state is a state where the Republican Party is the dominant political power, where Republicans control the legislature and the governorship and therefore get to make the laws in that state. A blue state, then, would be the same situation, only with Democrats in charge. And that's a fair enough definition. The problem is the conditions which make a state red or blue under that definition are not immutable. A blue state can become a red state and vice versa due to the results of elections. Or at least, that's how it's supposed to work. Another problem is Greene is treating the populations of these states as monolithic. She wants to impose restrictions on the voting rights of people who move to red states from blue states because she wants to keep these nefarious, ultra-woke blue staters from moving into her beloved red states, implementing their leftist agenda and imposing their tyrannical policies of equal rights for LGBTQ people, higher wages, and responsible industrial and environmental regulations. But at the same time, she's also acknowledging that the populations aren't monolithic, because in her example, she describes people who leave blue states due to the fact that they don't like the policies in force there. But they still lose their right to vote for 5 years. Even though, presumably, if they voted, they would vote the way Greene wants them to. One of the most troubling aspects of what Greene is saying is the suggestion that in states where the Republican Party currently holds power, it has the right to enact laws designed to guarantee that it remains in power forever. We're in charge now. We're going to stay in charge permanently, regardless of whatever demographic changes occur among our population in the future. That she would even dare to suggest such a thing in public demonstrates that Marjorie Taylor Greene, and all those who agree with her, which apparently is everyone she talks to, either don't understand what democracy is, or do understand it, and absolutely do not want it. I want to point out a couple of things. First, most of Greene's fellow Republicans have either been silent regarding her recent national divorce remarks or spoken out against them. And second, I would take the negative reactions or non-reactions of her fellow Republicans with a grain of salt, because I'm pretty sure most of them would be all for Greene's national divorce idea if they thought for a second they could get away with it. And they're mostly just mad at her for saying it out loud. Greene's proposal is just another form of voter suppression, and Republicans love voter suppression. Whether it's gerrymandering, which in fairness Democrats are guilty of too, or limiting access to polling places in ways that disproportionately affect communities that tend to vote for Democrats, or mandating voter ID, or opposing the restoration of voting rights to felons who have done their time, or obstructing early voting or voting by mail, or demanding that entire elections be nullified because they just didn't like the result. Depriving citizens of their right to vote isn't so much a plank in the party platform as it is the foundation upon which the entire platform stands. But Greene's national divorce idea goes beyond blatant, widespread, ideologically based voter suppression to embrace perhaps the most enduring fantasy of the American right. Secession. I told you I'm not going any further with that bit. That's not who I am. A lot of this, most of this, is just straight up racism. Same as it was leading up to the Civil War. Racist white folks want to have their white ethno-state, and if they can't have it under the American flag, they'll just go start their own, even shittier country. And don't you think they won't? They're serious. They mean it. They're really going to go. Some of it also is because the dipshits who think this would be a good idea either don't know or know but somehow don't grasp the significance of the fact that many of their cherished Republican-dominated red states are among the states deepest in the hole in terms of federal funding. According to a study published last year on the website Money Geek, 7 of the 10 states most dependent on funding from the federal government were Republican-controlled states. As the article detailing the study puts it, Democratic-leaning blue states tend to be wealthier and pay more to the federal government than they get. In contrast, Republican-leaning red states tend to have less wealth and receive more federal government funds than they pay. So go ahead, shitheads. Secede. Cut yourselves off from the federal funding you depend on. See how that works out. Although, now that I think about it, perhaps I'm not giving Marjorie Taylor Greene enough credit. Quick aside, appreciate that moment because I'll probably never speak that sentence again. But really, when she says national divorce, she doesn't seem to be calling for a Civil War-style secession where a group of states leaves the Union to form their own country. Instead, she's saying that Republicans should be allowed to permanently consolidate their power in states they currently control while still receiving that federal funding, which is kind of smart. And also consistent with the practiced ideology of the Republican Party, if not the professed ideology. Republicans love to complain about the size of the federal government and how much money the federal government spends, but they only really have a problem with the federal government telling them what to do and spending money on things they don't like. It's similar to how they only oppose redistribution of wealth when it would be from the rich to the poor. They have no objection whatsoever when wealth is redistributed in the opposite direction, and in fact, they are actively working to do that all the time. Maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene realizes the problem with the poorest states in the country seceding and cutting themselves off from the federal funding they depend on, and came up with this national divorce scheme as a clever way for them to have their cake and eat it too. Or maybe not. She's so proudly, painfully clueless that the few times where it seems like she might know what she's doing, I can't tell if that's what's actually happening or if it only looks that way due to a kind of political pareidolia. Either way, the national divorce idea takes into account what for Republicans is a very uncomfortable political reality, and in doing so, betrays the weakness of the party's position. And that weakness goes beyond how dependent upon the federal government so many current red states are. It's not just money they're lacking, it's voters. That a Republican member of Congress, even one as credulous and intellectually vapid as Marjorie Taylor Greene, would even go so far as to publicly muse about Republican majorities in red states passing laws to restrict Democrats from voting speaks to how illusory its popular mandate is. Republicans rely on voter suppression so heavily because, in much of the country, it's the only hope they have of gaining and maintaining power. If every eligible voter everywhere in the country were able to vote, quite a few currently red states would turn blue overnight, including quite possibly Marjorie Taylor Greene's own state of Georgia. And that's with no mass migration of people from blue states to red states necessary. The only way they can enact the policies they want to enact, policies which are so unpopular and potentially unconstitutional that they have led some Republicans to suggest secession might be necessary and still keep the federal funding their governments need to function and many of their voters need to survive, is to make sure that their voters are the only ones who get to vote and their leaders are the only ones who get to lead. Not quite secession, more of a soft secession, a soft session. Have fun with that. Whatever you call it, it seems the American right's secession fantasy has evolved. And here I thought they didn't believe in evolution. Shouldn't be surprising. Hypocrisy is their tradition. It's what tells them who they are. How will the right accomplish its agenda, indoctrinate the children, closet all the queers, and how will the whites, as masters of the nation, keep the black folks in their place? Oppression, suppression, secession.